One of the fun things about spirits is tasting them and learning about what to look for. And as we've talked about, authenticity. What are all the different ways you can figure out what's going on with something, whether you, or even if you like it or you don't like it? Why? What appeals to you, and how can you identify other things you might enjoy that have similar characteristics? So we're going to do a little spontaneous tasting here, and I will first take a sip and, as a complete amateur, tell you what my experience is, and then we'll learn from the expert here how to really do it. So I would look at this and go, oh, it's a nice yellowish caramely color. Looks lovely. And then I would just maybe smell it. Oh, it smells a little bit sweet, and take a sip. I noticed a little bit of a bite, kind of at the back of my throat, some caramel flavors, and sort of a warmth as it goes down the back of my esophagus.
I have to believe that's what it's called.
We won't get too technical in the physiology here. And that's about it. And then I'll go, oh, that was nice. You know, maybe but that's about all I walk away from that experience with. So now we have our spirit sommelier and spirit competition judge here to tell us a little bit more.
Okay. I wasn't expecting this, so this is kind of a nice surprise. We're going to start off, first of all, I want to point out the glass. Very important to use a good glass that is good for nosing. The aromatics of a spirit are extremely important. 95% of how we taste is actually through our sense of smell. This is called a Glencairn glass. It's made out of crystal. It's a fantastic glass. So glad you had these around. First thing I'm going to do is I am going to pay attention to the color, but very cursory. It's not terribly important. It is nice to look at, but it's not going to tell you a whole lot about the spirit itself. The first thing I want to do is I want to roll it around, and I do want to point out that if you splash the whiskey, not a good idea. It's something that you swirl your wine around to get the oxygen in there, and we'll go into that a little bit in just a moment. But this, you want to just kind of roll. This will get the aromas working. This will get the flavors and characteristics working just fine. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to nose it, and I'm going to nose it a few times, not just once. The first time you're going to get your nose acclimated to the alcohol, to the perfumes of the whiskey, or the spirit, if the case were that. And you're going to nose it several times, and every time you're going to get a little bit more from it, particularly sweeter notes tend to come out. This does have a little bit of a sweet nose to it, and by about the fourth or the fifth time, I'm going to have a good idea as to how I'm going to judge this based on its aromas. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sip it neat. And that's going to be, let it roll around, let it coat your tongue, let it get to the sides of your mouth and work its way around your mouth. Let it sit for a little while and then swallow. That first sip I'm going to do neat, which means no water added or anything added to it. And I'm going to have to concur with Aymii that it is it has a strong vanilla caramel, typical of a bourbon, but it also has a little bit of a fresh cut grass, specifically St. Augustine grass has a little bit of a note to it, and a very, very mild anesthetic kind of note to it in the back. It's a little bit of astringency, which is not a bad thing. And then as it goes down, I get a little bit more of a warmth, a little bit of a heat to it. It's not a bad thing. Just going off of what I've tasted, I can tell that it is a higher age statement, higher ABV. It has a probably aged, I'm going to guess anywhere from 7 to 10 years, and which is typically bourbons are usually aged about 2 to 3 years. This one's aged quite a bit longer, I would guess. You're picking up on a lot more complexity than if it were aged for just a few years. So that's, I'm going to score this very high. It's a great bourbon. It's got the characteristics, the authenticity of category, which is almost invariably the first thing that you're going to come across when judging, is how well does it fit the category, and in this case, it fits a bourbon very well, and then some. The elements that aren't typical of bourbons are really more of just a bonus added plus to the experience. Nobody is ever going to argue with a little bit more complexity than you bargained for. So.
And so you mentioned the first thing you would do was sip it neat, and
Right.
now we have this glass of water here
So
for you.
the second thing I'm going to do, I'm going to try it with just a little bit of water. Now, I've been in bars where you've got guys sitting at the bar and says, "Would you like some water with your whiskey?" And they, "Oh hell, no, I'm not gonna, no water with my whiskey." It's actually a good thing. The water is oxygen, basically. You're injecting a little bit of oxygen into the spirit. It's the same idea as we mentioned earlier, talking about the wine, swirling the wine around, getting a little bit of an oxygen from the air. But with whiskey, you need a little bit more of a direct approach. And what the water is going to do is release a lot of the flavor compounds, fats, proteins, esters that are in the whiskey, and kind of release them, open them up a little bit. Now, especially with a higher ABV whiskey like this, I'm just going to add a little bit more than I typically would. This is a really nice straw here. Aymii doesn't do anything halfway. She goes whole hog, even on her straws. So this is, I'm going to add that, and I'm going to let it sit for a little while.
And that
let the water do it. That's about 6 or 7
drops,
on this
something
one,
like that,
just
yeah.
because it's a higher ABV.
Okay.
Now, if it was a lower ABV and I was getting that much heat off of it, then there'd be something wrong. The 40%, as just so everybody understands, it's what I like to refer to as the minimum wage of whiskey. So if I were to go to a job and try and get a job somewhere, and they said, "Well, we'll pay you minimum wage. We'd love to have you, but we'll pay you minimum wage." That means that we'd pay you less if we could, but we can't legally, so therefore we're just going to pay you minimum wage. Well, 40% legally, if it was any below that, then it would be it would actually not be called whiskey anymore. So they water it down before it goes into the bottle. That means if we could give you less whiskey if we could, but we can't legally. So
Would it be called something different, or is it just not sold below 40%?
it would be called something different.
Okay.
Anything below 40% isn't going to be whiskey, or it's not going to be a liquor.
Okay.
It's going to be a liqueur, or
okay.
So so you could try it now, see if you get any more aromatics out of it.
And you had mentioned when we spoke earlier about keeping your mouth open.
Oh
when you
yeah,
smell?
yeah. You want to keep your mouth open. If you'd actually be surprised. Try it with your mouth closed, and then try it with your mouth open. You'll actually notice that you'll pick up on a little bit more elements from the spirit when nosing. And
yeah, I can tell the difference. Even I have a fairly mediocre at best sense of smell, and I can really tell the difference with the mouth open or
well, and the
closed.
more you work at it, the more you try it, you'll actually find out that mediocre sense of smell that you thought you had is actually more complex than you thought. You actually are more advanced than you thought. For a lot of people, it's just really a matter of just continuing to practice on it and focusing on it.
I will practice more then, if I must.
Yeah. If this is what it
If
entails.
I have to, yeah, exactly. Yep.
Imbibe, indeed. Yeah. The first thing I'm going to notice is actually a little bit more of a banana character, a little bit of a banana peel element. But another thing is that the heat is all but disappeared. I wouldn't say it's completely gone, but your heat element has come down detectably, noticeably, after just a little bit of water. So what that does is another thing that adding the water does is actually bring some of the heat down, so that your palate and your olfactories can pick up on a little bit more without being just inundated with a bunch of heat and smoke. So, yeah.
Yeah. And even again, to my inexperienced palate, I can notice a significant difference from just a few drops of water.
Yeah, it helps quite a bit.
Yeah. So I intend to practice a lot more, and we hope that you at home, or wherever you are, got some inspiration out of this, and that you'll give this a try either with bourbon or whatever your favorite beverage may be. So have fun out there. And thank you again for sharing all your knowledge and experience with us.
Absolutely, my pleasure.